Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Sorry, so, David and Joanne, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you better now. Is that me making that noise?
Earphone for me? Is that possible?
Pardon?
Oh. You know, I think I am the problem, so I am just going to say we are thrilled to have Joanne here this evening for her book launch of Festival Days. In conversation with her tonight is David Hollander, and we are thrilled to have you both, and I will pass it over to both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm terrified to speak.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, it's you.
It is Joanne, actually.
Do you have on a second device? Is it possible that the laptop that is probably open in the next room is interfering with the signal?
That seems unlikely, I think. Joanne, do you mind just going down to the bottom right of your screen and making sure you don't have any other browsers open?
You mean like Firefox? Okay, now what?
Let's see.
Is that okay?
No, it's still happening. Let us see.
It's kind of funny it wasn't happening before.
Yeah, this has happened to me once before, but I was the issue last time. Let's see.
It's probably good that it's an issue, really.
Joanne, do you mind closing out and coming back, and I'll invite you back on the screen?
Really? Oh, no.
I think that happened once before. Can you try that?
Okay, I don't know how to find it again.
Okay.
No, I can do it. Okay, bye, guys.
Goodbye. Okay. Everyone out there.
I know Joanne well enough to know that this is just a stunt, so she doesn't have to appear in public. Fortunately, I've prepared a lot of material. My stand-up act is,
I'm here.
Oh, and it seems like we're better. So the aliens have left us. Spirits have ascended. Thank you all for your patience.
I saved the day, I just want to say.
Yeah, you're my hero.
Thank you.
Well, would you two like to just begin, or would you like me to formally introduce you now that we have all the oddities out of the way?
David, we can do it, can't we?
Yeah, we can just do it.
Okay.
I think we're okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Although, Joanne, I thought it was like a piece of Andy Kaufman-esque performance art where you would just leave me here in front of all these people.
Leave you there and then occasionally just wander through and stare at you. Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Well, I'm just very excited to, well, I'm excited that you chose me to do this. It's like quite an honor to talk about you with, talk about this beautiful book. And since I know you don't really want to read, I thought we could just talk about, it's just such a beautiful, heartbreaking, original work. It's so you, but I know it's come together over like a long period of time. And maybe we could start just by talking about, how that happened for you, when you sort of knew this was a book. Like, how long have you been working on these pieces?
Well, you were there all along, but we didn't know that I was working on a book. So I didn't figure out that I had enough pages to create a book until my friend Alice Stark said to me a couple of years ago, "You have enough pages to make a book." And it was really surprising to me. But then I added them up, and I had just enough to be able to bind them into a book. But what I was going to say is that I'm pretty sure, with the exception of maybe the Sherry Trimble piece, that you were there and you and I were talking about the writing of these pieces and about whatever else you were writing at the time for all the years that I've been working on it. But that's really close to 20 years now.
Right, going back to the earliest piece in here.
Right, but
yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that there's a difference between conceiving of an idea, sitting down to write a book, and then saying, "Oh, it takes me X number of years to write a book." It's a little different to just be writing essays and stories, and then one day say, "Oh, they could be a book." I never had that thing hanging over me of a large project. I only had small projects over the years that became this large project.
Was it like that with your first collection of essays, The Boys of My Youth?
It was, actually.
Yeah.
It was.
Okay.
Most of those pieces were written when I was in graduate school. So they were written because they were called for in workshops. And so then by the time I got out of that program, I had nearly enough pages to make a book. And again, I didn't have to think, "Oh, I'm going to write a book," which would be really intimidating to me to think about having to do that.
With this book, I know that in the your introduction, you talk about how a couple of these were initially published as stories, and so yeah, I guess as like fiction. And it's always really, when we talk about your work here around the house, me and Margaret, we talk about how your way of writing nonfiction is to sort of imagine your way really deeply into the inner lives of others in a way that feels like what a fiction writer does with their characters. Is there a difference for you between like the pieces that are nonfiction and the pieces that were fiction initially?
Well, they don't feel different really when I'm writing them. And I started out thinking that I would be a fiction writer, and I only wrote nonfiction, probably 4 or 5 years after I started writing fiction. So even though I don't think of myself in any way as a fiction writer since then, that was where my original desire came from to be a writer, was to be able to write novels and stories. And for many years, my favorite thing to read were short stories. And so the idea when I was, so I wrote a novel in Zanesville, but the idea while I was writing these stories that I was actually making a story, something that I had studied and studied and studied over the years as a reader and appreciator, was really exciting to me.
Well, they do read like stories. I mean, I wonder how, like, for instance, with Werner and with Sherry, it seems like in order to write these individuals as full people on the page, you must have had to, one, spend like a lot of time with them, I would think, and two, give yourself the liberty to write into parts of their lives you don't know directly, right? How do you get access to people in a way that allows you to do this?
Well, in the case of Werner, he gave me access. He agreed to let me tell that story. So then with Werner, I just was able to ask him any question I wanted to ask him. So I was able to ask him all of the blow-by-blow details of what happened to him that night and the nights that followed. But I was also able then, after I did that research, asked him those questions over a couple days, I was able to go back through and ask him questions that would give me answers that would create this sort of metaphorical layer of the essay. Like the stuff about having jumped off the bridge in Eugene, Oregon, like what it felt like to do that, what it felt like to be a guy who hunted in the woods, and it's not good enough just to say this is what happened to Werner one night, because that's the story that Werner was telling at dinner parties, in the way we all tell our stories at dinner parties. But for me to make it worthwhile to myself, I needed to imagine that other layer that connected the metaphorical meaning to the actual events that occurred with him. So Werner is so patient, and he's such an artist, a visual artist, that any question I asked him, he could provide an answer that was perfect for me, but went even beyond what I had asked. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about how in your piece called Now, which comes a little bit later in the book and is kind of like a craft essay, you talk a little bit in there about having, as a writer, part of your job is almost to like invent the reality. You're almost like making it real by writing about it. How do you, probably writers in the audience at least would be interested in like how that works for you, like this like exactly what is going on associatively as you're writing?
To make characters feel three-dimensional, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, to find, because you don't just it's certainly not like somebody doing in-depth interviews and then writing what they find. When you're writing about Werner, when you're writing about Sherry, you're digging pretty deep into their pasts, into their own associative thoughts, right? Like something is going on that seems almost like magic for you to be able to get this deeply inside of people who you are not, right? And I just, something about it is really fascinating to me. I think I'm really just expressing my admiration for you, but maybe there's a question here somewhere.
Thank you. Well, it does give me a chance to say something that's really important. The first thing is that for all we want to say about like how wonderfully I got into Werner's head or got into Sherry Tremble's head, the truth is actually that Werner wasn't that thrilled about that essay after I wrote it. He didn't feel completely that I had recreated the experience that he remembered, which makes perfect sense, right? And I think that Sherry Tremble's daughter, who was lovely and completely supportive, also kind of said, yeah, I don't really recognize my mom in that. Because you can't. I mean, these are extraordinary people. How do you actually make them come alive on the page? And especially in the case of Sherry, who I never met. So all I can do is sort of steal their story and tell it my way. But it doesn't mean that for them it would feel like any kind of reality.
How do you choose the people or the stories that you want to work on? How does that happen?
Well, I think that that with Sherry Tremble, I was captivated by the idea of her courage and this experience of going all the way to your moment of death and then stepping through into the beyond. I just wondered what it felt like to do that so deliberately, against your will. I mean, it's it was assisted suicide, but she didn't want to die. She had no choice. So I was fascinated by that, and I wanted to feel what it felt like to be her as much as I could. And, in the case of Werner, I wanted to know what it felt like to come all the way up to your moment of death and then survive it.
Yeah, there's this like powerful element of chance, I guess, in these stories, right? Just like it's chance that a fire opened up in Werner's wall that night, and it's chance that he was able to survive when others weren't, right? That seems to be a theme in a lot of your work, just the randomness of things.
Yeah. Well, I know you agree with me on this. That's how life is. Like, you think, like Werner, that you're doing everything right in your life, and still the fire can come up through the walls, and the walls can be made of basically of horsehair, and they can just ignite. And it doesn't matter how talented you are as a painter or how well you can jump across a courtyard. If there's a dresser in front of that window, you're going to die. And you don't have any control over whether there's like a dresser in front of that window. And most of the people listening to this haven't read the piece, so they don't know what I'm talking about, but they will when they read it, because it's extraordinary, right? What Werner did.
Yeah, it's hard. It's another way that it reads like a fictional story. Just like the madness of it seems like it would have to be invented. But and in the case of Sherry too, as you say, obviously she did not want that disease. It found her, as things tend to find us.
Right. And the crucial thing for Sherry was not that she had terminal cancer, but that she could not tolerate pain medication. So therefore, she couldn't have a normal death. No matter what she did, she was going to really be suffering horribly. And so that's why she made that choice. It wasn't, that's how I understand it anyway. She was forced into it.
Yeah, the awfulness of that choice. And yeah. Okay, but there's this other thing you do in these stories. Actually, do you mind if I read a paragraph from Werner and tell you something I like about it?
Thank you.
This is on the very first page of Werner. He loved New York for its simple surprises, although in truth, Oregon and Iowa and Arizona and everywhere else had simple surprises as well. Cantaloupe-colored sunrises, banded cows, Dairy Queens, all kinds of things that didn't include black plastic mountains of trash and the smell of dog urine. But on that night, it wasn't like that. It was cold and fresh on the dark streets. He rounded the corner and his building came into view, a turn-of-the-century tenement where, right about then, just before midnight, December 19th, 1991, another kind of New York surprise was taking shape. Deep inside the walls, 3 floors below Werner's apartment, a sprig of cloth-wrapped wire sizzled and then opened like a blossom. So that description, right, this floral description of this destructive force opening like a blossom, right? I find these on every page where something that ought to be anxiety-provoking or horrifying is treated with whimsy or beauty. There's a moment where you talk about a tornado plucking fence posts out as if it were unstitching a hem, right? And there are just like images like this everywhere. How do you arrive at these realizations or these metaphors or moments?
I don't know. You go deep into the dream of it and you just watch what's happening and you see it. And that the fence post that got pulled up like a row of stitching, I saw that. That was at my house when my husband and I slept through a tornado because we were too lazy to go to the basement. And we got up the next morning and I saw that fence lying there. And, in the moment you go, oh my God, look at that fence couple, and there's a dead cat and all this other horrible stuff that's so traumatizing. And then years later, you get to retrieve it and you get to use it for something that feels like sort of redemptive or something like that. You go, yeah, in that moment, I thought I was going to freaking die after that tornado when I had to look at that little drowned kitten. But then years later, it shows up and becomes this like interesting moment in the story.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, like this sort of presence that seems to be required to write the way you write, like to really see this moment, and to see it, often I think what's so powerful about your writing is you see so many things as if they've never been seen before. There's like a freshness to arriving at it. And I'm just thinking as like a writing teacher, how it's you in student writing, you so often see them choose like sort of the first image that will come to mind, and so there's like an obviousness about it, but there's this startling quality to the way you choose images and metaphors. So again, really just admiration. But I'm also thinking about how there's a moment in Sherry where I think I could find this one too. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Putting the food away in the kitchen gives them time to compose themselves. They were warned, of course, but nevertheless, it takes a moment. The deterioration has accelerated in the last days, ravaging her body, but leaving her face as translucent and still as frosted glass. And this moment of like beauty and fragility, I find it so moving, and I come across them so often. So you're reading your work feels like communing with first things or something. And so that quality of like imagining your way so deeply into these moments, I guess, again, I'm just curious about whether or not that happens when you're consciously writing a fiction. Is it the same? I'm thinking about In Zanesville.
I think it is. I think it is the same thing. I mean, all writing is the same thing, to me. And yeah. That probably shouldn't be as true as it is for me. But it all feels like the same thing, writing fiction and writing memoir, or writing the kind of nonfiction that Sherry and Werner is, which I'm not really saying it's total nonfiction, but it begins there, and it's attempting to be that.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know you live with a writer, the renowned novelist Scott Spencer, who I think is in the next room, maybe listening. And so, what is that like to live with a fiction writer? Do the two of you share work? Do you talk about your work?
Well, it's funny. We usually don't. We've done it a little bit recently during the pandemic, just because, we've gotten to the end of other entertainment. And now I just go, and he's writing a book right now that I really, really, really love. And so I feel like saying to him sometimes, and do, just read me some of that book now, because it's interesting to see how things unfold. And he's a different kind of writer than I am. We've even tried to collaborate on projects, and it's really kind of an interesting thing to watch, because we couldn't be more opposite in our approach. Like, he's very loose and everything's fine and don't worry about it, and we'll go back and we'll fix it. And I'm totally like a tight ass going, what? And he's constantly going, no, that's not how you do it. You say yes and. But I always say no, because. And, so we don't collaborate very well. But I love witnessing the way he writes. It helps me, because it helps me relax a little bit. And I have to say that if anybody in the world has come through as a fan for me when I really need it, when I really need somebody to just read something and say, this really works, he's that person. Like, he really gets what I'm trying to do. He really gets it.
Yeah, I love this no because thing. That must mean that your process is slow. Like do you feel like you can't move on until something is the way you want it?
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense to me until I get it right, and then I know where it should go next.
Yeah, that's the way I should be, Joanne.
Don't you write like that?
A little bit to some extent, but there are days where I feel like I just have to knock out these several thousand words and will just be reckless. I don't think you're ever reckless.
I don't do that. I do something, the opposite, kind of to the point of being a little, more than a little bit kind of constipated by the whole process.
I love how in the essay, the craft essay, the Alaska one now, how the whole essay is built around the idea that you have procrastinated on writing this essay up until this moment, right? Is that part of the no because also?
Yes. But also that piece was written for students, and students somehow think while they're writing, they feel like they're in a bubble of misery. And they don't realize that we're all in separate bubbles of misery. Even their teachers are in bubbles of misery. And so that's kind of why I started that piece that way, by explaining that I could spend the entire summer not doing one thing. Like every day I would wake up and go, I am not writing that thing today. And then my whole day would be sort of like tainted and have deckled edges because I had already decided not to do my real work.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. By the way, I have decided to retroactively title this conversation Bubbles of Misery because I really like that. Yeah, but I think that idea of like when you have to do your work, you do your work, but right up until then, it's really difficult, and I think that's something all of our students probably do relate to.
Right.
Speaking of which, how do you go about teaching writing? That's something we've done together for a long time now.
We have done that together for a long time. And I have to say that my style has not changed at all over the years. I do the same thing. I'm not exactly sure what I do, but I really love the kind of writing that I teach, which is either the personal essay or memoir. And, sometimes Brian wants me to teach fiction and I say no, because I don't know how to teach fiction, but I really do know how to teach the personal essay and memoir. And, I guess that I learned how to do that through writing with my friend Mary Allen. Like, she is a very good writing coach and teacher, and she's also my writing friend. And so she applies her talents to me while we're writing together, like encouraging me, pulling things out of me that I didn't know I had, praising me in a way that helps me relax and go, oh, I can do this. It doesn't matter. Mary thinks what I'm doing is really great. Mary thinks I'm a genius right now. And it's amazing what happens when somebody gives you that permission. And also, like in the case of Mary, when somebody really, and you're writing personal essays, and this is somebody I've known for years and years, so she knows my past and she knows how to say, well, maybe you should plug this in there. Remember when that happened? This is relevant. And, I've taken that over the years into the classroom and into Sarah Lawrence, the conference system, where you work one-on-one with people. And I basically become Mary to their Joanne. And I think it works really well. It feels like a give and take, and it feels like you're actually helping people access the core true story that they want to tell. And a lot of times in personal essay and memoir, they have all these other things that are in their way that they have to swim through this debris to get to the real story. And a lot of what we do in our workshops is actually point out what's debris that can just be pushed away in the water. And that's super helpful sometimes.
Yeah, that's I love that metaphor actually. Do you talk when you're in workshop about sentence level choices, image choices? I'm thinking about, again, just like the freshness of your images. Is that something that comes up as well?
Well, we talk about their images a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Because for me, that's what when I'm reading, that's what I care the most about. Is I care about those palpable, visual, iconic things that continue to recur through a story or through a novel that make it seem palpable and real to me. Yeah.
This is a non sequitur, but could we talk about animals?
Sure.
Because you know, I know that you have worked with dogs and with animals, and that you know, you and I share some things in terms of animal compassion, and I know that animals are in most of these stories. Maybe all of them. They at least pass through maybe all of them. But are you? I don't know. Why do you think you write about animals so often?
I love animals. I know it's like a creepy, banal thing to say, but it's true. I love animals. I love them. I love my dogs so much sometimes that it's embarrassing. And it's a good thing that I live with somebody who also loves dogs as much as I do. And I know that he's in the other room going, don't say that, because he doesn't talk to the dogs the way I do. But, you know, they really matter to me. Dogs matter to me. The dogs that I live with and the dogs that are everywhere in the world matter to me. And they always have. Ever since I was a little girl, there's something happens to me when I see a dog that makes me just like feel happier than I was before. And I know, like, for instance, there are a couple dogs watching this tonight.
I hope they approve.
And I'm saying hello to you, Ginger. So glad you did.
The great thing is that the dogs, unlike us, are not in their bubbles of misery.
That's right. They actually don't have bubbles of misery. Even when they're in miserable circumstances, it's amazing that you can unclip the chain they're on, you can walk away with them, and every shitty thing that's happened to them is in their past. And they're just like, wow, this is really great.
Oh my God. Yeah, imagine.
Imagine.
But it's, you know, it's not just dogs either in your book. You know, it's also ducks and squirrels and cats, and you treat them all with a human level. You give that, you imagine their inner lives as well, right?
Yes, but falsely, of course, we know that. Like, anthropomorphizing animals is something that a lot of people who care a lot about animals and nature really frown on, but I'm totally in favor of it. So, and I always have been. It's like we should imagine that they feel what we feel, because if we do, then we'll treat them better.
Yeah, it's true. I really don't know how else you could write about them, at least not with the regularity you do, right? And then, of course, there are also animals that, you know, in the book, sometimes animals are hunted and killed for food or for sport. And that, too, you just sort of, even then, there's a sense of like compassion and interconnectedness, I would say. Did you grow up, well, what do I want to ask? Did you grow up around people who hunted?
Yeah. Yes. As a small child, I was served squirrel. I mean, squirrels, they were like outside. They were everybody's friend. The squirrel was everybody's friend in my neighborhood. And yes, my father would go out and hunt squirrels. He didn't know any better. Like he thought that was a good thing to do because he was taught to do it and he had always done it. And he hunted for food. Even though, by the way, we did not need him to hunt for food. We got our food at the grocery store like everybody else did. But he did stop hunting at some point because he couldn't justify it. It started to make him feel bad. And, you know, I know other people who feel that way too. It's all received wisdom, like you should do this because other people have done this before you. And then someday you have this moment of awakening where you go, it's really not right. I mean, it's probably not right. I mean, who knows, right or wrong, but it's weird to go to the grocery store and buy a package of meat also, but it isn't the same thing as taking a gun and killing a living thing. It just isn't. You have deniability if you buy the package.
Yeah, that's why people do it so easily.
I know. I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. So what has it been like to have this book coming out during this pandemic? What is your pandemic writing life like?
Well, I don't have much of a writing life. But the book coming out during the pandemic is great. I mean, the pandemic was fine for a while, and then just very recently I have started feeling really like chafing against not being able to see people and do things. And so having the book come out and all the things that you have to do around that has been really engaging. And actually I've had 2 other books, but for some reason I just was so divorced from the process of putting the book in the world that I didn't pay a lot of attention to how it was done. And this time I felt really interested in how it's done and why it's done and who's involved in it and who are the people who are making the cover of the book and who are the people who are editing it. And it's been really fun. It's like sort of learning a new skill, you know, to observe it and see it. And then suddenly you have like this object that has your name on it. And like the New York Times comes out that you read every week and you open it and it has your name in it. I'm not kidding you. I thought I was going to die. I did. I thought I was going to die. I was like, okay, talking to my 5-year-old self going, this is you, look what's happening. It was so exciting. I can't tell you.
Yeah, no, it was amazing for me too to open the Times and see you in there, you know, and then I felt compelled to make sure you knew that I knew so that I could try to embarrass you a little bit, but but yeah, I think there are you know, it's been a long time between essay collections at least, but I guess, do you feel like you would have to now start a new project from scratch? Would that be the plan going forward?
Everything I've ever written, every single thing I've ever written now, I have scraped together and put out in the world. So I have nothing. But, you know, I've been writing for 30 years now, and I have 3 books. So it takes me a long time to do anything like that. And that there's nothing I can do about that. I can try to fix that the way I have for years and years, but it won't get fixed. It's just what my process is. So I have to be happy with it. And
no, I know what you mean. I know that when it seemed like the title essay of the new collection, Festival Days, that one, was your process any different in writing that one? Because it has a different feel to it. It's really electric. Like the associations you normally make in a story are happening at like a sped up pace. It feels like it's really just vibrating. And it feels like faster somehow.
Yeah, I wrote all of that with Mary. And both of us working on projects side by side, sort of over a couple of years. And so we would write in these short bursts where you just have to keep writing. You can't stop writing. You just keep writing. And sometimes we were across the table from each other, and sometimes we were across the country from each other. But our vow is to just keep writing. It doesn't matter what it sounds like. And so then a whole essay emerged with that. And so it is a different style for me. And it's kind of a relief, because I think, well, maybe I could do that in the future, and I could produce some essays faster than I have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's what happens, because I just find it so moving and so pyrotechnic, where I really can't believe that you're making one startling decision after another in that essay. It really just like doesn't stop. And it's heartbreaking too. It's really, really beautiful. So.
Well, you were really helpful to me when I was writing that, because I showed you a couple pieces of it, and you were like, yeah, just keep doing this. Just keep doing this. And then you kept asking me about it. Like, are you still doing that? Are you still doing that? And it felt, I mean, this is what we need, writers who are listening. We need that encouragement from each other. So all my former students who are seeing each other's names on here, remember, this is what you have to do for each other, because it matters. You saying that to me really mattered.
That's really moving, just to know that I had any kind of an influence on any of this. But I know that's true in our relationship just generally. Like, if I show you something, I know you're going to say something good about it. And I'm showing it to you so that you'll say something good about it. And that's such an important part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're a really good writer, and I know people don't like to listen to people go, you're really good, but you really are a good writer. So it's exciting to read what you write. I mean, it's exciting to me to be in the company of other writers who are working really hard to do what they're doing. That's why I want Scott to read his novel to me at night. That's why I want to read your pages. That's why I like to write across the table or the country from Mary, because I want to be in that, I'll use the word dialogue, like in a dialogue with another writer, because it's the only thing that makes this feel worthwhile. Even more so than having a book.
I remember once you saying something about how the process of making art had to sort of trump art. Otherwise, we were all doomed.
We're doomed anyway, but...
Yes, we're doomed anyway.
We just are, yeah.
But I would say that we should see if anyone in the audience wants to ask some questions.
Okay.
But we can keep talking in the meantime. And I would just like to invite people to do that, and I could field them as they come in. But just thinking about how our relationship at the college for years has been like a writer to writer relationship. It's such a sort of salve to have that at the place where we work.
Yes, to be able to walk over to Heimbold and share our sad little fake meat sandwiches and the giant 3,000 calorie muffins that they sell over there, and complain about how we have too much work to do, even though somehow we find a way to like sit around and complain. We have plenty of time for that.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of time for that, but it does feel like this different kind of space, like when we meet over at Heimbold and talk about books or writing, it feels like a conversation not taking place so much at work, but that's always been special.
It's like a writing conversation. It's like a conversation between artists.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. We don't really have any questions in here. Well, there's one question, but it kind of was already answered, which was why so much time between books? Which I guess we've covered a little bit, just that's your process, right?
Yeah, I can't do any better than that. I mean, I have to say that for most of my writing life, I have woken up in the morning and said to myself, why so much time between books? But it doesn't help. It just, you do what you can do. I like to avoid doing difficult things, and writing is difficult.
A question we have here is, how do you decide on the order of the essays in the book? That's a good one. How did you?
Random. Always take the longest one and put it at the end and entitle the book that. And then, but no, it really is random because they don't really go together, because like the Sherry Tremble piece was written, in like 1999 or something. And that essay now was written just a couple years ago. So how do you make them fit together? You can't,
It's that's fascinating to me, because I thought for sure you had meticulously ordered them, because they read like they're supposed to be in this order. It's really a seamless the way they feed into each other. So you have to answer that question different next time you get asked.
Yeah, but I will, I'll say something about that, which is that you're bringing the reader's mind to the project, and you're making sense of it with your reader's mind in a way that I didn't with my writer's mind.
Yeah.
So it's really, you can get by with a lot of things as a writer because readers are willing to fill in the gaps for you. And that's an occasion where you filled in the gap for me. And you thought it was on purpose.
Yeah, which is sort of like a level up from what you're doing in the work, where you're filling in gaps or inventing pieces that aren't there.
Right.
All right, wait, now we've got a lot of questions coming in. A few of the stories in the collection deal with time in really interesting ways. Can you talk about that at all? I don't know, can you?
Well, I can notice it when other people point it out, but when I'm writing, I don't think about that at all. It either happens organically or it doesn't happen. So it would be, I don't even notice it when I'm reading. I don't even notice it when I'm reading as a teacher. Like, things either work and they make sense to me or they don't. And so, I will notice if somebody points out to me, like this goes back and forth in time or something, but in the writing of it, I just don't notice that.
Yeah, that's I'm thinking about in Festival Days, how there's so much time motion there, but it does seem like part of this associative journey, where one thing reminds you of something else that took place in another time, another place.
Right.
Yeah.
Megan Gilbert just asked me in the chat on the sidebar if me and Mary Allen talk and read each other's work every day still. We don't do that every day, and we probably never have done it every day, but any meaningful, and Mary does it with all kinds of writing friends that she has, because she really has like a really good writing practice, and mine is not that good. But I would say that for the last few years, everything I've written has been with Mary. So we don't do it every day, but for me, it's all the writing I do is with Mary. Although I think that essay, that Now essay that I wrote over the summer about Alaska, I did that one on my own. And then I called her and bragged about how I had written an essay on my own. She was like, that's good, let's hear it.
I love that. What is your favorite essay by somebody else?
Oh, well, most of my students know the answer to this, which is this essay called The Limit by Christian Wyman, that I teach every semester to every class because it's brilliant and beautiful, and it's like a template for how to read, write, and teach at the same time.
I would not have guessed that was going to be your answer. I don't know why.
What did you think it would be?
I thought you might have said something by E.B. White, actually, knowing what a fan, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe Philip Lopate or Annie Dillard. So, yeah.
All of the above. All of the above. But Christian Wyman has made my job so much easier by publishing that as two versions of that essay. And yes, and somebody just wrote on the sidebar, Wyman is my favorite. Yeah, because the thing about Christian Wyman is that he's first and foremost a poet. So that means that the language is just extraordinary, which is what I find entertaining in a piece. So anyway.
We have a question here from Alice Dark. When do you see what the ending of a piece is going to be? Along with the compliment about how amazing your endings are, but like when do you start to see the ending? Do you know early on, or?
Sometimes you write toward the ending, but when I do that, typically the ending changes, you know. So, but what happens is that the piece, for me, the piece starts gaining in power, and it's like I'm carrying with me this whole raft of images. And by the time I get to the end, it's like it's all gonna fall. And then I just rush to the shore, and there it is. And I know that makes it, that sounds, I don't know. I don't mean to sound like that, but that's how the endings happen. All of a sudden, it's just there. And you go, oh, that's really great. Or sometimes I don't know for a really long time. And like when I was writing in Zanesville, I couldn't find an ending for it. I just kept, it was like, this thing is never going to end. It's like, what's going to end it? And then one day I went out and sat down in front of my computer, and it ended just like that. It was sort of astonishing. So,
Yeah.
Alice, the answer to that is I don't know. But thank you for asking. Thank you for caring.
I remember years ago when I was a student at Sarah Lawrence and I was taking a class with Joan Silber, she told us this thing that I'm paraphrasing it, but she said basically beginnings were really fun because you hadn't done anything wrong yet. And endings were really fun because of the rush you're describing of rushing for the shore. But there was this whole middle thing that was substantially less fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you feel you have more authority writing fiction or nonfiction / memoir?
I think that I would have to say, I'm not sure about the word authority, but I think I feel more comfortable writing nonfiction memoir. Fiction feels really hard to me, like you have to think about what's going to happen. Whereas with nonfiction, you know the beginning, the middle, and the end. You may not have decided what the end is going to be, but you know where the story goes. And of course, the hard thing about nonfiction is that you have to take that completed story, completed in your memory, in your head, and you have to actually make it mean something. And mostly in life, things don't mean anything. They just happen randomly, and they're either shitty or they're great, but they don't mean anything. And that's the job of the writer, is to infuse it with meaning. So they're both hard, let's say. I think we'll all agree that they're both hard.
Yes, I think probably a lot of writers in the audience are relieved to hear us talking about how hard it is. And, you know, I've always been driven crazy by the writers who say, oh, yeah, write every day. You know, these people with these, you know, write every day, a book every year. So because I'm certainly in your camp, you know, like it happens when it happens. I can't control it.
Right.
Yeah. Hold on, you have a lot of questions here now, Joanne. We won't get to all of them, so let me see if I can find a good one. What was it like to revisit essays that you wrote many years ago, and did you feel an urge to revise them for this book?
I didn't feel an urge to revise them because they had all been published. And so I allowed myself to just say, well, those are done, because they've already appeared and it wouldn't be right to go back in and tinker with them. Although now I realize they would. But I think that we all know that I don't tinker with things. It's like, I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to pull one of those things apart and fix it. It can either be published with its faults, or it has to just be put in a drawer and I have to start over again. So, which is heartbreaking, right? But
yeah,
it happens, you know.
It does. I mean, yeah, it's the same for me. So then when you get to the end of a piece and you've written the end and you feel like it's done, it's really probably done, right? You're not going to go and start sort of piecemealing things.
No, I'm not going to.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way, which can make it challenging to sometimes teach writing, which seems like the workshop is built so much around the idea of revision. But I personally don't. I mean, I think a lot and revise as I'm going. I'm sure you do too. But
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's important to teach revision because a lot of people write that way. They produce pages and then they start whittling and whittling. And actually, that's what Scott does. And so I get to observe that. And I have to tell you, it's a more satisfying way to write because at the end of the day, you have something to show for what you've done. And
Yes.
you don't feel so afraid the next morning that you're going to face this empty thing again.
Yep. Yeah, it seems so much better and so much more sane to write that way.
Yeah. Lucky.
Yeah, I'm sorry we're not that way. Okay, hold on. Let's see.
I love this. My friends are saying hi to each other in the chat.
I know the chat is so lovely, but don't get too sucked into it. It's like a vortex. You'll never escape it.
I'm not gonna.
Okay, here's one, Joanne. Did you keep a journal in India, or did you write festival days just based on memory?
Based on memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as discussed, I think memory is itself partly not exactly invented, but you seem to like pull things out of memory that maybe you didn't even know were there, right?
I've sort of trained myself to remember things. You know, you can do that. It's I've worked on it over the years.
How do you do it?
It's a professional secret, really.
Sorry.
That also might sort of have been a lie, but I think I have trained myself to remember things like better than other people do because my writing process is sitting in a chair with my computer on my lap, staring out the window. And if I'm not remembering or thinking, what am I doing? So that's why I say that I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah. I was hoping you'd share the professional secret for the rest of us mortals out here, but I understand you got to keep something to yourself. Okay, hold on. Let me find another one for you.
Okay, but we only have 1 minute to go, David.
Okay. No, this one we kind of answered these in different ways, I think. Do you ever jump back and forth between two essays or two projects? Do you ever work on two things simultaneously?
I don't think I've ever done that in my life. I don't think so. I worked on In Zanesville while I was doing other things, but I would completely stop one thing while I worked on the other. And so no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't have the bandwidth, as they say nowadays, to do that. I just don't. I can barely work on one thing and watch TV. So I just don't have time for more.
Yes. I remember once George Saunders, when he gave a talk at Sarah Lawrence, talked about how he would go to his writing desk and he would have like 4 or 5 things he was working on, and he would ask himself, what would be fun to work on today? And yeah, I know. And I was just so jealous that he could have so many things. It could be fun.
And they probably all were fun to work on because.
And they're probably all great.
Yeah, they're all great and they're weird and fun to get into and think about. Yeah. Well, that's him.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. What should be our parting words before we allow the MC to return and usher us out of cyberspace and back into the rest of our lives?
Well, I would say that I just want to say thank you so much for how carefully you read the book and your feedback that you gave me along the way, but also for tonight, because you really asked me interesting questions, and thank you, and fielded the questions from the chat and stuff. So,
well, I feel like an oaf around you, and I am in awe of you. That's really true. And so, when you asked me to do this, you thought you were asking for like a favor, but for me, it was like such an honor that you would want me to do it. And so I'm really happy. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
Okay, and thanks to everybody who showed up tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
Thank you both so much for such a thoughtful and interesting conversation. We're so glad you could join us this evening. And Joanne, congratulations again on your release today of Festival Days. And to our audience members out there, wow, thank you for so many thought-provoking questions. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but unfortunately that is how time limits us. If you're interested in a signed copy of Festival Days, you can get that at oblongbooks.com. There is a link at the bottom of the screen. Thank you both so much again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone buy 3 copies of Joanne's book and give them to all your friends, okay?